Hey there, I got it. That's better. Hey there, I'm Matt, and if you have an in-ground pet fence, chances are you've experienced similar issue. System stops working, goes into alarm, and well, that's probably why you're here. So in today's video, I'm going to walk you through step by step how to diagnose the issue and get your fence working again. Having an in-ground pet fence has been an easy and cheap way to contain our dog Emmy without having to go through the effort of installing a traditional above-ground fence. It's allowed us to be creative in setting up a zone for her to move around, something that we couldn't have achieved otherwise. But unfortunately, these in-ground pet fences are known for having issues over time, often due to the wiring becoming damaged. And since the wires are underground, it's usually a dreaded repair to deal with. And in some cases, owners don't even want to deal with the hassle. They'll just scrap the old system and buy a new system. And with that, let's run through the general structure of these in-ground fences. Most in-ground fence systems are generally the same in the different components they offer. These systems use relatively thin gauge wire that are buried, usually a couple inches underground. Usually a small, simple trench will do the trick. And depending on your spool length, it's not uncommon to have splices within the wire, and these obviously can be a point of failure. Depending on the configuration of the system, the two wires may join back together, at which point they're coiled, and as they return into the house, this coil allows the point at which the pet can cross over without receiving correction. And then usually indoors, either a garage or in our case, our basement, we have the transmitter that those two wires connect back to. And this transmitter is what sends the signals to the wires to form that invisible fence. Lastly, we have our receiver collar. So this is what's going to detect the signal as the pet crosses over the boundary and will give them an alert or correction. Now that we've looked over typical components of a fence system, we can get into troubleshooting ours. Before we dive too deep in trying to figure out what's going on, we're going to do a simple test of the transmitter. It would be pretty fruitless to go through and try and find a break in the wire if it just so happens to be that we have an issue with the transmitter. First thing I'm going to do is unplug our two fence wires that are going into the transmitter and just use a simple piece of copper wire to serve as a jumper. This jumper wire is essentially going to mimic a complete loop. And so what we're going to do, plug this in. If our transmitter alarm goes away, we know the transmitter's okay. If the transmitter continues to alarm, even though I have a confirmed loop here with my copper wire, well then we know there may be an issue with the transmitter. Alright, our jumper's in place. Gonna go ahead and switch this back on. So we can see I'm not getting the alarming or beeping anymore, even after this is powered back on, but as soon as I disconnect, we get it again. So we've simulated now what's causing the alarm to go off when we've got our fence actually plugged into this, and what that's meaning is we've got a break somewhere here in our fence wiring. So the way this underground fence is set up is we have these two wires that come in. We essentially have a circle of wire around the house. When this is working properly, we have a nice continuous loop, but when we have a break in the wire, it breaks the loop and our fence no longer works. So now that we know it's the wire that's the issue, I'm going to be using my wire tracer here from X-Tech. This is a cheap version. There's definitely more expensive versions out there. This was about 20 bucks on Amazon. But this here is the transmitter that is going to send signal through our wire here so that we can identify where that break is. The first thing I'm going to do, this transmitter has two functions. It has the tone function where we actually go ahead and trace the wire, but it also has the continuity tester built into it. Lots of multimeters have the same function, but I'm going to go ahead and take the two ends of the wire here and attach our clips from our continuity tester. So if we get continuity, meaning it doesn't detect a break in the wire, this green light should turn on. Otherwise, if we attach the other end of this clip here onto the wire and it doesn't turn on, that's going to indicate that we have a break. So we can see right now the continuity light is not on. So this loop of wire that goes outside around the house shows that it is disconnected somewhere, which is what we suspected, but this is a good confirmation. And just as an example here, if I go ahead and touch these two together to form a loop or continuity, that light comes on. So that's what I was looking for when I was touching this clip to the other wire. Doesn't come on, means we have a break somewhere. What I'm gonna do is take my transmitter here on our tracer kit, turned it on to tone mode. So what that's doing is it's sending a small electrical signal through these alligator clips. And then I've got a receiver here that's listening for that signal. And as it beeps, that indicates that that signal is going through the wires. So I'm going to turn that off right now. First thing I'm going to do is take one of the clips on this tracer kit and connect it to one of the wires there. So what we're doing right now is we're sending an electrical signal through this left wire here, and you can see it kind of spirals with the other wire, but eventually on the outside of the house, those two wires go separate ways. So this is going to essentially be sending signal through one direction of the loop, and we can use our receiver here to try and follow that signal and see where it ends in order to find the break. And then the other lead is going to get connected to metal here in our utility room. And then as we're in tone mode, we can use our tracer or receiver to pick up the signal. But the big thing here is this lead attached to metal, if it's not attached to anything, it's not going to give you that signal going through. So when I installed our system, I ended up having a few sections where I left some wire exposed. And across the whole perimeter of the house, I've got several points where I can see the wire, which will be easy access as I'm using the tracer. As a point of reference, I've got 5 locations marked on this diagram, 3 on the east side, 2 on the west side. These are going to be the locations that I'm referencing as I'm using the wire tracer. I started on the east side of the house at location number 1, and the distance to this point from the transmitters actually about 1/3 of the overall loop. So this is a pretty good distance. As I hear the signal from the receiver, I can tell that the wire is intact from here to the transmitter. This means I can go on to the next location. Location number 2 picked up a strong signal, so I hopped over to location number 3. And we can tell this one's intact as well. Now we're at location number 4, and as I move the receiver around, I am getting no tone or signal, indicating we have a break somewhere between location 3 and 4. And even though I have a general idea of where the break may be now, I did want to just go to location number 5 and check it out, and similarly, no signal at all here. After the initial scan of our 5 points, we saw that locations 1, 2, and 3 had a tone, locations 4 and 5 didn't. This also confirmed that we had the transmitter hooked up to the end of the wire leading to the east, which explains why we did not hear signal at locations 4 and 5 on the west. And because I love to prove things out, what I did is I ended up switching the alligator clip from our transmitter to the other wire so that I could see if I'm now getting signal on the west side and losing it on the east side. And right away, as I went out to the east side where I had the strong signal previously, I have no signal here at all. And then heading back to location 5 on the west side, getting a really strong signal. This proves that we're now sending signal through the west end of the wire. I then moved over to location number 4. Here's another section of exposed wire, and we're getting strong signal. I ended up hopping over to location 3, which was one of the locations where I got signal when I was sending it from the east end. We're not picking up signal. So again, right now, we're sending the signal from the west. Going back to our map, we're now getting signal through locations 4 and 5 on the west end and no longer getting signal on the east end of the loop. And this fully proves that our break is somewhere in between locations 3 and 4, as that's where the signal stops. So we've got a break somewhere a little further to the west. So the way this wire runs is it kind of sits under these pieces of lumber here near the fence, and I'm still not getting any signal. So you can hear, stops, comes in, All right, so just as an example, I've got this receiver sitting here. It's on, not picking up any signal. But as soon as I connect those wires, I get the signal disconnect, and it pretty much goes away. So for now, I've just gone ahead and twisted these two wires together. I'm gonna have to make a more secure permanent splice there, but you can see we've got our wires reconnected, and we're now getting signal heading in the east direction. So after twisting those wires together, I'm getting signal back over here on the east side of the house again. After going through this effort, we were able to pinpoint the wire break between locations 3 and 4. And after splicing it back together, we were able to restore service through the entire fence. The hardest part with this tracer is that it's not exactly designed for these underground pet fences. There's better ones that are going to give you stronger signal. And so if you don't know where the wire is and you're trying to find it with this tracer, it may take a while because it doesn't necessarily pick up sounds the greatest if they're buried in the earth. Ideally, if you have some exposed wire or you know where the wire is buried, then a cheap tracer like this would probably be just fine. So now that we've repaired the break in the line outside, we're going to go ahead and plug our two wires back into the receiver. I'm going to turn it on and see if that alarm has cleared. No alarm. So we've now resolved our issue with the in-ground fence. Wire is repaired. No alarm down here. And for the final test, we're going to take our collar receiver and bring it outside and move it over across the wire just to make sure that it's activating when it should. And the beeping we hear indicates the fence is functional again. Not that we didn't trust Emmy to stay in the yard, this just gives us that peace of mind we can let her out and we know the fence is working. Alright, so there we have it. No alarm, fence is fixed. And hopefully you found this content useful, and if you want to see other DIY fixes and projects around the house, including how to install a brand new in-ground pet fence, feel free to like and subscribe. See you next time.